We pick apart the idea of natural here a lot at In the Flesh. And for good reason, because it's usually a pretty incoherent concept. It's almost always in air quotes here. Today, however, we're really going to focus on and subject the idea of essentiality to some pretty severe scrutiny. That means we're going to do some pretty serious nutritional philosophy, which happens to be our specialty. And we'll find out that nutritional philosophy is really just nutritional storytelling. In fact, we'll find out that everything is just storytelling. However, unlike we usually do, we will not be doing this by focusing on vegans and/or vegan argumentation. Not today.
Not today.
Today, some very foolish keto, low carb, no carb, carnivore zealots are gonna be in the crosshairs. Not all of them, because they don't all argue this way, but I've seen enough of them doing it that it's time for your boy Danny to bake up and serve some humble pie. Made with keto-friendly almond flour, of course. After all, you've got to put your own house in order first, right? As a result of all of this, I'm gonna end up giving vegans the single greatest argument I have ever seen for abstaining from animal products. I don't see this argument widely employed in debates in the circles we all tend to run in. I'm gonna give you a real gift today.
It's got a friggin' bow on it.
You're welcome, vegan family. Today's video, like usual, is gonna be a pretty lengthy one. If you wanna skip straight to the section where I get down to brass tacks and give vegans their gift, then go ahead and use the chapters feature down below and skip ahead to the dietary carbohydrate section. Before you do that, allow me to say that I worked really hard on this one. I'm super proud of it, and the journey I take to get to the dietary carbohydrate section is pretty interesting and involves William James, the noumena and the phenomena, the 7 basic plots, nutritional storytelling, a criticism of capital S science, a couple of very well-placed community and BoJack Horseman clips, and cats that can walk on treadmills despite having their entire brains removed. I would highly encourage you to sit back, relax, take the 30 minutes, and enjoy the journey. Rolling! What's up, family? It's your boy Danny, fresh in the flesh, reminding you that you are beautiful, capable, and strong, and you are gonna stay that way because you are gonna eat meat, move weight, and write an epic story. Yeah, that's right. If this is your first time here and you wanna learn how to think about and how to control both your body and your mind in the most efficient manner possible, that is, if you wanna Pareto optimize your whole friggin' life, well, hang on your dang socks and smash that subscribe button. We all tell stories. We tell them to others, and we tell them to ourselves. Now, I don't mean lies, although we all tell those too.
We deal in deception.
I mean stories. Reality just is a story that we tell ourselves.
We're all stories in the end.
Our brains just work that way, narratively. This contention about ourselves and our brain function is itself its own narrative. In the story that I'm telling you, not only is there no such thing as the raw sense data, what William James once called one great blooming buzzing confusion, there's also no such thing as percepts, concepts, or anything like that either. Stories are the only thing that actually exists in this sparse and desert-like ontology of ours. Even the problem of universals, which is really kind of just the problem of knowledge itself, which has vexed Western philosophy for millennia, is at its root also a storytelling problem. Christopher Booker analyzed and reduced all of the stories across all of the cultures that all human beings sort of tell to themselves down to 7 basic plots. These basic plots are amazing tools. They are almost like the Kantian categories. We use them to sort of mold and form the noumenal realm that is beyond our grasp into the phenomenal realm that we actually experience. Tapping into the arcs, the archetypes, and the tropes of these 7 basic plots is a primary and fundamental part of all world building and of all human experience. For instance, there were heroes and villains even in the story about the scientific discovery of the hormone leptin, which you can read about in the book The Hungry Gene. And don't even get me started on the demonization of Ansel Keys, which is a story in and of itself. Screenwriters, religious leaders, therapists, authors, scientists, engineers, inventors, advertisers, they all do a really good job, a great job even, of writing stories. Consequently, they all end up doing a lot of the heavy lifting of world building for us. I'm not sure that this is the terrible thing that strident, anti-advertising, anti-capitalist storytellers make it out to be. Sometimes our stories are exploratory frameworks for understanding our own selves and our own place in the world, like in therapy or psychology or sociology. Other times, stories are our framework, our exploratory frameworks for understanding the world itself, like in physics or chemistry or geology. In all of these world-building exercises, there are rules.
Smokey, this is not Nam, this is bowling. There are rules.
The rules both of storytelling and the internal logic of the story itself, and these rules should not be broken. Whether it's AMC, Pixar, Disney, Penguin, Dateline, Verso, Semiotext, Good Morning America, or the New England Journal of Medicine, the rules of storytelling should not be broken. Breaking the rules of storytelling is like inserting a really discordant note into a otherwise fantastic chorus in a great song. It just feels off, and everybody notices. How annoying is it when you're watching a great movie or a great television show and the rules of storytelling are broken? How annoying is it when storytellers can't stay consistent? I'm looking at you, Walking Dead. When we're writing our own stories and they aren't as internally consistent as they can and should be, we are breaking the rules of good storytelling. We're becoming that really discordant note. In fact, most self-help is actually about teaching us how to write more internally coherent and consistent stories. This is supposed to help us achieve greater personal congruence. Self-help guru Byron Katie's method of asking, "Is it true?" over and over again to the people that are telling her their stories is an incredibly effective method for getting people to achieve greater personal congruence. Truth, after all, just is consistency on some level. Byron's questioning forces people to be more honest with themselves about the quality and the consistency of their own stories. Often, it takes other people, or other people notice inconsistencies in our stories more readily and easily than we do ourselves. Thankfully, other people really love pointing these inconsistencies out to us, especially random strangers on the internet. While we're on the subject, when you can't stand something that you see or think or feel is in somebody else or is a trait or character defect of somebody else, it's usually one of your own personal inconsistencies or incongruencies mirrored back at you. In a sense, the somewhat unexplained anger that we feel in the presence of these people is very often just misdirected or projected self-loathing. I project myself onto you and then back to me. In science, we call this process of pointing out inconsistencies in the stories of others peer review. Part of this process of peer review is picking apart the stories that the people that were being studied told the original scientists that wrote up the story. Or, in a criticism of a meta-analysis, people pick apart the story that the scientists are telling about a collection of stories that are themselves collections of stories. Science, with a lowercase s, is really just a bunch of stories about stories. It's stories all the way down, family. This is a perfect time to remind you that the plural of anecdote is data. Anecdote is just another word for story. In fact, there's now so many of these stories, so much data, that it is impossible for any one person or group of persons to keep up with it all. Which means it's impossible for any one person to have a God's eye view that makes sense of all the stories that exists. Diversity is inevitable in this sense. Publications of scientific medical journals started in the early 1600s. It has since then rapidly increased in volume, representing the most explosive field of journal publications worldwide. New medical articles are appearing at a rate of at least one every 26 seconds. And if a physician were to read every medical journal published, they would need to read 5,000 articles per day. It is therefore impossible for anyone to have a complete coverage of the available medical literature. Physicians must therefore be able to separate the wheat from the chaff in this era of information jungle. This is why I try to avoid that silly game that a lot of This is why I try to avoid the silly game that a lot of YouTubers and Twitterers do, of searching out the abstracts of the stories that they like, or the abstracts of the published studies they like, and throwing them at a wall and seeing what sticks. Instead, I like to discuss more basic physiological and psychological facts that aren't really up for debate, or at least aren't up for as much debate. In other fields, this process of peer review goes by different names. It could be criticism, movie review, deconstruction, art, voting, protest, etc. Within the framework or a framework of friendship, or at least respect or mutual respect and conviviality, this activity, peer review or criticism, can produce growth both in the critic and the target of his criticism as well. Outside of this framework, this kind of activity is really just judgmental bitchiness, a power trip, a plot, a scheme, hatred, viciousness, discontent, and or dehumanization of the other that just inevitably leads to conflict and not growth. When I criticize Vegan Family, it is in this spirit of loving friendship and conviviality. It is with an open heart, an open hand, and an open mind that I do this. And if this isn't crystal clear, please let me know in the comments down below. It is in that exact same spirit that I'm going to criticize my low carb, no carb, zero carb, keto carnivore family today. Eat less, move more is a story. Don't eat meat is a story. Don't eat vegetables is a story. Don't eat carbs is a story. Eat only meat is a story. Eat only vegetables is a story. Don't eat refined food is a story. Like Aesop's fables, all of these stories have morals. Many stories are actually just kind of like veiled rules to begin with. They are almost imperative constructs in the passive voice. What all this means is that stories are sort of like commands with clothes on, like a kind of narrative analogy.
Somebody tell Britta what an analogy is.
I know what it is. It's like a thought with another thought's hat on.
Sometimes stories are told so well and seduce so many people that they transform into worldviews, governments, revolutions, or religions. When this happens, these stories turn into philosophies, constitutions, rebellions, or sacred scriptures, and their authors turn into philosophers, presidents, rebels, revolutionaries, and prophets. Some of these stories eventually filter down and turn into nutritional guidelines, dietary advice, or the food pyramid, or my plate. I'm honest with you about this because I want to tell a story that is so beautiful and so inspiring that you intentionally forget it's a story.
You gotta believe that change is possible.
I want you to use what I'm telling you to write your own story, a story in which you're a beautiful, capable, and strong person.
You have to tell yourself every day, I can change and I will change.
A story where you are carrying a torch lit with Promethean fire. I want you to wake up and guzzle ambrosia every day. I want you to write a story where you understand that your consciousness, when it is properly focused, is the residue of divinity. And make no mistake about it, when you're focused, it is. This is because attention is a superpower. It's a real golden hammer. What this means is that if you can focus, you can do anything.
I can change and I will change.
I want you to really believe this story. I want to capture your attention, but I want to do it fair and square, with talent and without trickery. This is what all of the various philosophies of nutrition are doing as well, trying to capture your attention. Metaphors are dangerous, even though we live in many ways through them and by them. All these stories are just competing memes wrapped up in narratives that are filled with metaphors.
Everything is a metaphor.
Just like women, fire, and other dangerous things. Actual physical fire and the Promethean fire I'm trying to hand you. Metaphors are important components of stories, of understanding, and of reason itself. Sometimes stories are just big extended metaphors. Each storyteller in the nutritional community is trying to make an end run around the others and capture an audience or market share. Some of these storytellers do that by using words that don't function primarily to communicate, but that function primarily as spells or incantations or charms, and words that also function, and this is most important, as thought terminating cliches, whether it's by using the word natural, essential, non-essential, normal, or healthy, or using the word science with a capital S. The goal's the same, to get you to buy into the storyteller's narrative without the storyteller having to do the very hard work of telling a consistent and good story with a clear vision. Artery-Clogging Saturated Fat is a story with one of those dangerous metaphors in it. Fat doesn't clog the arteries according to the story's own internal logic. Lipoproteins do. This means the story is breaking its own rules. Except that doesn't really happen either. Something assaults the arteries, and then the body tries to heal the wound from that assault with lipoproteins that happen to have cholesterol in them. However, it only happens in very specific arteries near your heart. So is it even really clogging your arteries, plural? It doesn't happen in your femoral arteries, for instance. But do you know how they clog the femoral artery of a diabetic dog with fat? They don't actually use fat, they use insulin. And speaking of metaphors, while we're on the subject, fat is a freaking lubricant to begin with. Sugar is what gets sticky and clogs things up. Do you slip your tight wedding ring off with a melted sucker, or do you use melted butter? But all of this whole line of thinking is just really bad storytelling. It's revelation of the method time. I'm gonna show you how this works now. Now, many of you have heard that your brain is the most energetically expensive organ in your body, and that it uses up so much of the energy despite only constituting a fraction of the mass. Telling you this, framing it this way, is an attempt to get you to believe a very certain story. These people want you to focus on the brain. They want to get you to believe that it's the most important organ, obviously. And it's a great story, a story where the brain is the protagonist, mind over all. It's a truly inspiring story even. But these storytellers are doing it for a reason. They need you to understand that the brain is a kind of computer, at least analogically or metaphorically. And this is a dangerous metaphor. They tell this brain as computer story because the computer is the very real technology that makes them all their cash. Well, I got some bad news for you. Well, I guess I just got news for you. The brain is not a computer. You aren't gonna upload your soul or your brain into the cloud, even if you believe that this is really good storytelling. Let's back up a bit though. If by energetically expensive, you actually meant energy used per gram of organ mass, then actually the kidneys and the heart take the cake by over double the amount of the brain. That is, the kidneys and the heart are both twice as energy demanding as the brain is. Which means when considered as a whole, the pumping blood and filtering its system is actually 4 times as energy demanding as the brain is, gram for gram. Does this change your view of the brain? Does it mean the brain is somehow less important? Do you want to now upload your heart and your kidneys into the cloud now that you know this? Well, guess what? That's what dialysis is. We've already got cloud-based blood filtering apparatuses thanks to the obesity crisis. Congratulations, you live in a fantastical, magical, futuristic world of cloud-based kidneys. Try this on for size. From Stefan Guillenet's The Hungry Brain. Grill spent a year perfecting a technique that allowed his team to surgically inactivate everything in the rat brain except the brain stem and nearby structures. These decerebrate rats were unable to use most of the circuits in their brains, including their hypothalami. Surprisingly, when Grill's team placed food in front of their mouths, they would chew and swallow normally. Even more impressive, when offered food continuously, decerebrate rats would eat the same amount as intact rats normally eat during a meal and then abruptly refuse additional food. They would take meals, exclaims Grill, still excited by his seminal finding 4 decades later. The similarity with normal rats didn't end there. Decerebrate rats reacted to a variety of satiety-related signals in the same way as normal rats. They ate less at a meal when Grill's team gave them a snack first, and they ate less in response to satiety hormones that the gut normally produces when we eat. This demonstrated without a shadow of a doubt that the brain stem, not the brain, the stem is single-handedly capable of monitoring what's happening in the gut and generating the satiety response that ends a meal. If that wasn't enough, try this on for size from Chris Kirtley's book on gait analysis. Since there is no mechanical coupling between the lower limbs, the coordination responsible for the alternating motion of the legs must arise somewhere within the nervous system, and cats' rhythmic locomotor patterns are generated in the spinal cord by self-sustaining circuits called central pattern generators, or CPGs. As every parent knows, when newborn babies will make a stepping movements when their feet are touched alternately onto a surface. Similarly, cats will walk on a motorized treadmill even if the whole brain is removed, or if the thoracic spinal cord is transected. Or what about this? When it comes to our brains, does size really matter? One of the biggest myths about the brain is that bigger is always better. But what about those who sit on the extreme end of that scale? How much of our brain do we actually need to survive? Looking through the archives of medical history, there are a number of people with teeny brains or brains with huge chunks missing entirely, which defy all odds. In a 2007 Lancet study, doctors described an incredible medical oddity. The 44-year-old civil servant who had lived a normal life despite having an incredibly teeny brain. The Frenchman went into a hospital after he experienced weakness in his left leg for 2 weeks. Doctors were quite surprised when they took scans of his brain and found a huge, fluid-filled chamber instead of a brain. The man went on to live a normal life, and he got married and had 2 children. Tests showed that he had an IQ of 75, which, although below the average of 100, is not considered a mental disability. There are things far more deep and far more ancient than your prefrontal cortex going on in your body and soul. This doesn't mean that the brain is not important. What is important is that you understand everything, and I mean every single fact, can be manipulated this way. Facts are just clay or putty in the gifted storyteller's hands. All of our most precious and tightly held beliefs are really just stories and not facts. This is the true story about us that I'm telling you. Calories or energy can be just as much of a shape-shifty piece of clay as anything else, depending on what we choose to focus our attention on. In one such version of the story, there is no such thing as a calorie or calories to your body at all. This is because calories have so many different fates in the body that calorie is not or does not serve as a useful abstraction. Nevertheless, energy and calories can both be useful metaphors and can both be useful parts of our nutritional story or our nutritional storytelling contra Gary Taubes. But when they dominate the story, when they push out all the other characters, and when they become heroes contra the CICO or psycho-obsessed, they aren't useful characters anymore. I'm going to do another video on the body's 3 energy systems to respond to this idea that we're just energivores. That's really a critical part of the energy balance story, and I'm going to explain to everyone why that's just really bad storytelling. I've already touched on precisely this topic in my What is Hunger video. If you're jonesing, go ahead and watch that when you're done with this one. But we're going to touch on it today too because of the hypocrisy, because of the inconsistencies in the nutritional stories that I see in the low carb, no carb, zero carb, keto, carnivore, and fasting obsessed nutritional communities telling. I'm in quite a few of these groups on Facebook, Reddit, etc., and I've read their foundational texts. The idea that we aren't designed or evolved to eat regularly, and the idea that it's not natural, and the idea that we shouldn't eat carbohydrates or dietary carbohydrate because they're non-essential, both get passed around an awful lot in these circles or these nutritional communities. There are also in these communities lots of people soliciting advice on how to deal with very specific health issues that are often induced by the very strict or stringent diets in question. But that's none of my business. We can live for a couple of months without eating. But to suggest that we should is absurd in my opinion. And in fact, the fasting cult never does suggest that we should take it to 50 or 60 days or that we should trigger refeeding syndrome, even though that's natural. So I fail to see how intermittent fasting is not regular eating to begin with, but nevertheless, we'll entertain it for the sake of argument. But why is it always just intermittent fasting? Why a 16 and 8 window or a couple of days max? Why not take it up to the very point of death? Why not a medically supervised fast? Why is it always OMAD or 1 meal a day and not OMEOD, 1 meal every other day? We're designed for it after all, right? Let me explain why I think the idea is really absurd and then just make up your mind yourself. And again, we're gonna use, like I always do, basic, indisputable physiology. We can trigger MPS, that's muscle protein synthesis, every 3.5 hours or so, which is exactly how long it takes a mixed meal to empty your stomach. That's right, it takes a meal about 2 to 4 hours to leave the stomach. And a meal then takes about 3 to 5 hours to travel its way through the small intestine from the duodenum to the ileum, what's left of it at that point anyway. That seems like pretty solid proof to me that we're designed to eat fairly regularly, and that it's natural to do so, whatever that means. In fact, it seems like prima facie evidence that the very point of a meal is to trigger muscle protein synthesis. But does this evidence or these facts mean that we're not designed or evolved to fast? Does it mean that fasting is unnatural, whatever that means? Nobody said that. Why can't people hold more than one story in their head at one time? The fasting cult is just telling you a very specific story. They're telling you a story where you were designed or evolved to starve. This story has devolved from a scientific hypothesis about food scarcity and the origin of obesity into a form of neo-breatharianism where I've got people in these groups on the internet telling people that they don't need to eat regularly to build muscle. Telling people that they can use fasting to build muscle tissue because of my growth hormone or whatever. Guys, you can't eat growth hormone, you can't eat insulin, you can't eat testosterone, and you can't grow without eating a whole hell of a lot of food. Them's the breaks. Why the heck would you think that simulating starving or actual starvation would be a great way to go about building muscle to begin with? Is this a story that makes any sense to you at all? The point is to be able to have the right foods around you to be able to trust your hunger rather than fight it every single step of the way. Asking people to hate their own hunger, to take cold showers, to take ice baths, to do all kinds of weird quasi-ascetic shit is asking them to internalize a hyper-puritanical worldview and to condemn their own bodies simply because those bodies have needs and desires that they're not in control of. This is a nutritional story that profoundly disconnects you from the source of your own being. You are not going to transcend your own humanity by fasting. Chill out, yo. All right, moving on to the low carb, no carb, zero carb, keto, and carnivore cults. There is absolutely no dietary requirement for carbohydrate. You can live just fine on 0 carbs. They are not lying about that. They are correct. However, there's no dietary requirement for saturated fat either. That means your body can make all the saturated fat that it needs, just like your body can make all the glucose that it needs. Even crazier than that, the only 2 essential fatty acids that you need to consume are polyunsaturated fatty acids. That's right, PUFAs. Guess which foods are high in PUFAs? Vegetable oils, canola oil, soybean oil, peanut oil, margarine.
I can't believe it's not bothering.
Flaxseed oil. Have you ever heard the keto or carnivore cult members mention anything like that? Of course not. What you do hear is the keto and carnivore cult members telling you to eat lots of non-essential saturated fats and to avoid all of the essential fatty acids in the high PUFA foods. What does all this mean? It means that you cannot and should not make the argument that we should only eat meat or eat a keto diet based on the fact that we don't have a requirement for dietary carbohydrate. Because a vegan could make the argument, using the same criteria of essentiality, that since we don't have a dietary requirement for any saturated fat, that we shouldn't consume any animal products. The vegan would also have to argue against coconut consumption on this logic, but you see where I'm going here. Both of these arguments are really bad because they're overly focused on one single element of a nutritional story, and that's essentiality. If you have been arguing this way or have argued this way previously, you were being a bad storyteller. Stop it, bad storyteller. Why is it that keto people can understand the difference between the really high ketones that are present in nutritional ketosis and the really high ketones that are present in diabetic ketoacidosis, but they can't seem to understand the difference between the really high blood glucose that exists postprandially after a heavy carbohydrate meal and the really high fasting glucose that exists when someone has type 2 diabetes or diabetes? Why can they understand that toxicity is in the dose in one case but not in the other? Ladies and gentlemen, that's called confirmation bias. Continuing with the theme of essentiality. Just a friendly reminder that we don't need the non-essential amino acids to survive either. Most of the amino acids are non-essential. There is no dietary requirement for 11 out of 20 of them. Does anybody in the keto or carnivore cult ever say, "Hey bro, chill out, take it easy on all those non-essential amino acids"? Of course not. But riddle me this, cult members, what's the difference between saturated fats, non-essential amino acids, and carbohydrate? Essentiality is just one way of telling the story and telling it badly. Figuring out who the bad guys are and who the good guys are, or if there even are any good and bad guys, is way trickier than just throwing around big words and empty concepts like natural or essential or non-essential or science with the capital S. Just because dietary carbohydrate is not essential does not mean that it is toxic. Just because some amino acids and some fatty acids are not essential doesn't mean they're toxic either, or that it's toxic to consume them either. I want to be absolutely clear though how critical glucose is in the body. The body has a non-negotiable glucose demand that never goes away no matter how many ketones you're producing or how deep into ketosis you get, bro. It means people that literally starve to death, when we take their blood and measure it, it still has glucose in it. That's how important it is. This is because the liver can't burn ketones, red blood cells can't burn ketones, and the brain can only burn so many ketones. Fuck, man. In fact, glucose passes the blood-brain barrier naturally. So for all you fuckheads that care about natural so much, fucking ponder that for a little bit. Now, I've already demolished this don't eat carbs because they're not essential or unnatural myth, but I'm gonna go ahead and tell the story another way to just drive home how stupid this idea really is, and to return to the idea that facts are just clay in the gifted storyteller's hands. So, returning to amino acids. In humans, only 2 of the amino acids are exclusively ketogenic. 5 more of the amino acids are both ketogenic and glucogenic. The remaining 13 amino acids are exclusively glucogenic. Is this significant? Does this mean that gluconeogenesis is 2 to 3 times more important than ketogenesis? Does this mean that glucose is more important than fat or ketones? How the fuck can we even determine that? We can't, man. You can live without eating carbs. Congratulations. You can live without eating saturated fat or the non-essential amino acids as well. But that don't mean you should. Okay, to wrap this up finally and really drive home the point that I'm getting at here. How come when a couple of guys live on meat alone for a year, everybody in our nutritional community gets excited, but when a guy lives on potatoes alone for an entire year, loses tons of weight and improves all of his blood markers in a medically supervised experiment or self-experiment, we don't hear a peep about it from our nutritional community? I'll tell you why. Because veganism doesn't cause confirmation bias, being human does. Becoming a carnivore or eating a keto diet isn't gonna remove all of those biases from your brain, from your fucking firmware, brah. So, what do we know? Man, this was a long one, huh? We know that we need to be better storytellers than vegans, than people in the carnivore and keto cult as well. Again, not all of them. I understand there are exceptions to rules. It means that we know that we need to handle evidence honestly, and we need to write it into our stories honestly, and we need to maybe edit our stories if we haven't been honest in the past. We know we need to do this because the people that tell the best stories both honestly and consistently win. Don't you guys want to win? Don't you want to keep eating meat? Man, that's my superfood. They are coming for it. The vegans want to take that right away from you. Some of them, I know, there are exceptions to rules. And that is why I'm trying to write great content. And content is just another word for story, man. What story am I telling? I mean, watch all my videos. But nothing is inherently good or evil. Nothing is inherently toxic. This is a hard story to hear because it's a true story. Just like the story in self-help, which is you gotta help yourself. No one wants to hear that shit, man. Nobody wants to make the necessary psychological and physical changes for living a good life. But I don't want to oversell this in either direction either. So, the first direction. Just because refined foods and carbohydrate, dietary carbohydrate aren't inherently toxic or inherently evil doesn't mean that you should eat them. I am in fact making all of my videos precisely to convince you of why you shouldn't do so. At least not a lot. And in fact, I dream of a day when the middle of the grocery store has substantially shrunk in size and the outsides are taking over real estate from the middle. I dream of a day when the middle of the grocery store barely exists. I still want my Ben & Jerry's, yo. In the other direction, exclusive carnivorousness or fasting or keto and or nutritional ketosis isn't gonna kill you either. Your liver is a beast of an organ. It is the IV drip that's handling the matter of nutrient partitioning and distribution in real time. It can take a fucking beating, brah. Literally, you could chop off like half your liver. It'll spontaneously regenerate. I am not making that up. If your weight's stable and muscular and you feel great in ketosis, I am not telling you that you have to carb up. I'm not writing that story. Your liver will do the hard work of creating the ketones that you need, which luckily the liver doesn't burn ketones. It doesn't have the ability or the enzymes to do so. So there you go. But your liver can handle carbohydrate as well. Man, it's hard being an adult making choices. What? Because we're adults, we can handle ambiguity and we understand that goals and context come first. Okay, we have made it to the end. Thanks for sticking with me. I know this was a long one. Let me know what you think down in the comments, homies. Also, don't forget that you are a beautiful, capable, and strong human being, which means you are good enough for whatever life cooks up and sends your way. I want you to carry that fact with you, that story with you as you go about your business this week. It's your boy Danny reminding you to eat meat, move weight, and write a story that puts Homer's Odyssey to shame. Chuck-a-deuce! Bruno, shut up. Hey, when the end screen comes up, right? Remember that video I was telling you about what is hunger? That would make a really excellent complement to this video. It's gonna be in the upper right corner. Click the title card when it comes up, yo. Love y'all.